6:30, time to start the meeting. I'd like to call it to order.
Which meeting?
We're calling to order the Lafayette Urban Renewal Agency budget. First. All right. Any roll call?
Mayor Robinson,
Here.
Councilor Carswell,
Present.
Councilor Gogan,
Here.
Councilor Paulson, present, Councilor Burrows,
Here.
Councilor Hill, here, Councilor Mackey,
Present.
Christine Brunger,
Here.
Wonderful.
Chair Alvinson,
Here.
Michael Shinley,
Here.
Leah Harper, here, Shirley Burkett, Susan Harple, Shelley Wisdom.
Okay. First action is to approve the minutes for the Monday, April 22nd, 2024 meeting. Did everybody have a chance to review it, look at it?
Brandon, should the header say more than just budget committee minutes, but say urban renewal agency budget committee minutes?
It'll be under the URA section of the
Okay.
city thing. I mean, it's,
I only asked because someone asked before the meeting, they were confused.
Item number 6, it does list
we can revise it.
your budget. You want to revise it? No.
If it's approved, we can revise it with updating the header to the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee minutes. So in a motion, if they are approved.
The approval of the stated changes.
Okay, is it a roll call vote to approve?
Oh, did anyone motion?
No.
thought you did.
No, but again, I motion to approve with the added, changed, the Monday, April 22nd, 2024 Urban Renewal Agency budget minutes.
I'll second. Mayor Robinson,
Aye.
Councilor Carswell.
Aye.
Councilor Gogan.
Aye.
Councilor Paulson. Aye. Councilor Burrows.
Aye.
Councilor Hill.
Aye.
Councilor Mackey.
Aye.
Brunger.
Aye.
Chair Adamson.
Aye.
Michael Shinley.
Aye.
Leah Harper. Aye. Joseph Burkett. Susan Harple and Shelley Wisdom.
And so you're gonna fix the header and I'll sign off.
Yes, yes.
I think Joseph signed some.
Oh, yeah. Just revise that.
Okay, I guess this is Brandon, presentation of the budget.
Thank you, Chair. So in front of you, you'll have just the short budget message regarding this year's Urban Renewal Agency budget. This is the third year of the expected 10-year program, and reflects the minimal projected tax increment revenues of $140,000. The only expenditures we really have are going to be what we've had, are going to be for the administrative filings and the financial reports. Minimal expenditures. Continuing to increase the reserve funds of this until we're able to do a project. I would think that would probably be a few years out, and it's still going to be determined by the eventual sale and development of the 40+ acre tract or so in the southeast corner of town. So the budget will continue looking like this until we see some action over there. So this is pretty minimal expenses. And that's kind of where we're at for this year's URA budget. Are there any questions on anything?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is the property, when you first come into town, is that the property you're talking about?
Yes, the gray industrial lot
Okay.
right there, as you're coming into town.
Across the Dollar General.
Okay,
Yes. So,
who owns that currently?
it's in a family trust of about
Okay.
5 or 6, or 4 or 5 siblings.
Is there any action on?
Minimal, nothing really to convey publicly, but I mean, nothing where we would. Yeah.
Are there any public comments on the budget? Your, the urban renewal agency budget for 2026?
I move to approve the urban renewal district budget for 2026.
I just want to be clear, Hillary's initial motion was to approve minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just want to make sure that that may sound different on the record. I just want to make sure that's.
Yeah, mine was for minutes, because I don't think we've even gotten to the
Thank you.
public hearing. Don't know, if there's even,
I'll second.
thank you.
Roll call vote, Candy, please.
Councilor Kurzweil.
Aye.
Councilor Paulson. Aye. Councilor Burrows.
Aye.
Councilor Gooding.
Aye.
Mayor Robinson.
Aye.
Councilor Mackey.
Aye.
Councilor Cahill. Aye. Michael Shinley.
Aye.
Leo Harper. Aye. Christian Brungart.
Aye.
Chair Allenson.
Aye.
Shirley Burkett. Susan Harple. Shelley Wisdom.
Can I ask real quick, Brandon,
Yes.
were we supposed to have had a public hearing before we voted on that?
Yes.
He mentioned.
Yeah, I asked for public comment.
Okay,
Oh.
but we never opened it
Yeah,
as a
it's
public.
gotta be officially opened as a public hearing. Yes, like we gotta have the public hearing, open it for a minute or two.
Do that, just to open it, the public, close it.
Okay. To open it.
Okay.
So the last motion, is void, so we have to go back, open up the public hearing.
And we're opening the public hearing on the fiscal year 25-26 budget for the Lafayette Urban Renewal Agency. Are there any public comments? Absent public comments, do I have any committee deliberations?
Close it first, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, we closed the public hearings for the fiscal year budget 2025-26. Are there any committee deliberations? Close the deliberations, and do we have a motion?
All right, move to approve the 2025-2026 fiscal year urban renewal district budget.
Second.
Robinson.
Yay.
Councilor Carswell.
Aye.
Councilor Gooding.
Aye.
Councilor Paulson. Aye. Councilor Burrows.
Aye.
Councilor Cahill. Aye. Councilor Mackey.
Aye.
Christine Brungart. Christine.
Aye.
Chair Adamson.
Aye.
Michael Shinley.
Aye.
Leo Harper. Aye. Shirley Burkett. Susan Harple. Shelley Wisdom.
And my yay should have said aye, so I'm making sure you didn't hear me say nay accidentally, because I said yay. Okay. All right.
All right, so we adjourn.
Okay.
Now we open up the Lafayette Budget Committee. Call to order. Do we need a roll call again?
Mhm.
Roll call again?
Mayor Malcolmson.
Here.
Councilor Carswell.
Present.
Councilor Gooding.
Here.
Councilor Paulson. Present. Councilor Burrows.
Here.
Councilor Cahill. Here. Councilor Mackey.
Present.
Christine Brungart.
Here.
Chair Adamson.
Here.
Michael Shinley.
Here.
Leo Harper. Here. Shirley Burkett. Susan Harple. Shelley Wisdom. Chair.
Okay, everybody should have or have had a copy of the committee meeting minutes from April 14th, 6 p.m. Anybody had a chance to review them? Anybody have any questions or corrections? Modifications that need to be made?
I have one typo. On page 3, just above the section 7. It says city administrator Dross reminds the committee of the urban renewal agency. Let's go with.
Good catch.
Wow.
You would catch that one, wouldn't you? I didn't catch it. Are there any other typos or corrections need to be made to the meeting minutes?
I motion to approve the Monday, April 14th, 2025 Budget Committee minutes with the noted correction.
Second.
Counselor Carswell?
Aye.
Counselor Burrows?
Aye.
Counselor Paulson?
Aye.
Counselor Cahill? Aye. Christine Brungart?
Aye.
Chair Adamson?
Aye.
Mayor Robinson?
Aye.
Counselor Golden?
Aye.
Counselor Mackey?
Aye.
Michael Shinley?
Aye.
Leah Harper? Aye. David Burkett? Susan Harper? And Shelley Whitstone.
Do you want to fix that second page of?
It'll get fixed before we sign.
All right, any questions or comments regarding the public hearing on the fiscal 2026 budget? Are there any public comments? I open the public hearing on the budget. For public comments, anybody got a public comment?
So Chair, there are actually two separate public hearings. We need to do one for the state shared revenue and then one for the actual budget. So we need to open one first and then close it, and open and close the second one.
All right, we'll open the possible uses of state revenue sharing portion of the budget for public comment. And we'll close the first one. Then public comments on the,
We have to open.
I open the public comments on the 2026 budget. Any public comments on that one? We close that public comment. Public hearing on the 2026 budget. Any committee deliberations?
Did we skip number 2 of the agenda? The discussion by committee and follow-up items, because I don't know if Brandon had any follow-ups.
I do. I can do it for the chair's okay with.
Fine with me.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things I forgot to include in the last packet, and thank you for the reminder. We had our community outreach grant applications that were not included, and we did receive one by the date. I extended it to like April 1st, or I think April 2nd, just because we've gotten nothing. But we did get one from Valley Rugby to sponsor some scholarship registration fees of $1,800. So that is also in your packet. That is decided by council, but the budget committee does have the authority to look this over and see if there's something that they would like to fund or have the council discuss in July's council meeting. So it's $1,800 there. That is a city council decision on how much and if they do approve it, but the budget committee is at least tasked with approving the asks. I do want to mention though, in that we are working on some library services issues with McMinnville, forecasted for the next couple of years after this year. This year, their summer library program at Perkins Park has been funded, but that's not guaranteed for the next few years. I mean, luckily Lafayette was one of the cities that was able to be kept on as part of the summer programming loop. So I would like to at least utilize some of the additional funding for the grants to use as possibility to help offset the cost of this next fiscal year. I don't think it's going to be much more than a few $1,000s from what we discussed. And I think there are going to be some a mixture of volunteering and fundraising to make that happen. So we may not even need to use the funds, but I'd like to use that as a backup just in case funds aren't guaranteed, because the summer program does mean a lot to the residents of Lafayette in the summertime, especially the kiddos. So I'd like to at least keep that there and have for some bandwidth.
And Brandon, can I just clarify real quick? They did receive, when they had to cut some programs, Lafayette originally was cut. It's one of their larger ones. So they were able to, for this year, kind of as a Band-Aid fix, find funding for Lafayette. The continuing on after this year is dependent on individual funding, not like it's been cut as of now from there.
What's the location?
I'm sorry?
What's the location?
It's at Joel Perkins Park and they come, I think that's like
Every-
8 weeks.
Yeah, it's the bookmobile
Yes.
program.
Yes, and that's, I've been a part of that for my first couple of years here, and it always seems to be very active and engaging. And I know that's something that the community would still like to see. I'd like to at least have that flexibility in there. So if we're to come to council and there's an agreement to look at future services for the bookmobile, that we at least have the bandwidth to at least make that happen if there's some short funds on that.
Fran, I have a question. Did the city only receive one grant request?
At the date, yes, we had some coming after the fact, but they were like 3 or 4 or 5 days after the fact.
Okay, and so, when you're talking about the bookmobile, are you talking about that coming out of the same grant funding? Or
Yeah,
that's-
I would use that out of the grant
Okay.
funding because I think it would be a partnership later on down the line where we kind of include it like a CERT or whatever, but it's one of those things where it's kind of up in the air right now, so they feel pretty confident that it's gonna, at least they'll have some funding structures with
Right.
whatever, but that last mile funding,
Mhm.
the city needs to help in a little bit, at least have some funding there to help out. But not, it would be for next year.
Right,
So they'll be approaching us like, hey, next April, can you give us some
Right.
money? And it'll be from this year's, yeah.
okay.
Can you show me which line item it is for the grants? I was looking through and I couldn't quite.
Community grant.
31
Page 25.
Thank you.
Budget, yeah.
under general fund administration.
Well, it's promotions,
Mhm.
okay. I was looking under grants, so, okay.
Community outreach promotion.
But that includes the grant too, promotion. Yeah, okay.
And then outside of that, the only other follow-up item I had was there was some discussion about Lafayette costs for actual labor costs. And that's going to be outlined right here. I have a few of them to kind of pass around. And if you want to put that as part of the public record too, please. And you'll just see the first year of the contract, the training officer was the employee. And then starting in 22, 23, you see the training officer for 6 months. And then it went over to full-time chief at that time. And then 23, 24, and 25 budgets, you'll see where they're at with their projected labor costs. And that was asked piece. Outside of that, I have no other updates regarding anything that came up at the last meeting.
Brandon, I have a question, I'm sorry, about the grant funding. Last year, we had talked about during the budget committee, the 2,500, and I noticed this year it was, you put it to 3,000. And I just wondered if, that was did the council approve that or,
No, just I just put that in there.
all right?
So if there's any further discussions or
Other thing, sorry. I know, we talked about last, the previous meeting about the, it's line item 10 on page 37, the charge for water with Dayton, and I know, you've been given approval to proceed with negotiations. I'm assuming that's what it is. I just want to comment as a citizen that, when the initial line was going in, Dayton was part of that conversation, they backed out of it. I don't know, the details or anything else, I'm not here to discuss that, but I would just say whoever goes into that negotiation, I would ask that they would go in realizing that the city of Lafayette, we took on the burden of that debt and for our citizens. So I don't know what the negotiations are, but I just hope that when you go, whoever goes into that is looking out for our residents as opposed to Dayton. Will that be an IGA or is it something just
There would be about 3 or 4 different IGAs.
Okay,
And I can tell you my goal as the lead executive of this organization is look out for my organization, my staff, and my community
Okay.
first. So that'll always be the first.
It has been discussed, or your
Yeah.
point has been discussed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think everybody, well, the people I have talked to
Yeah.
are on the same page as you.
yeah, good, because, yeah, I'm just gonna drop it there, because
Yeah.
it's. that's a-
Yeah, this is more of a policy kind of discussion, but yeah, financially, we just have it in there as to chart for, because like Jamie had mentioned last meeting, if
Yeah.
we don't account for it, we gotta bring everybody back, and if it's just, if we don't get it, if it doesn't work out, it's a wash. If it
Right.
works out, it's accounted for,
Okay,
so.
Brandon, just to clarify, the budget on this is for the training officer.
No, but that's what the original position was when the IGA was first settled into, I guess, when they were looking for a fire chief. So that was the salary of when that was first signed off on, that was a training officer salary. There's no longer a training officer.
Okay, so that's falling off.
Well, it's never, the training officer was part of the transition of the IGA, the organization, because I think at the time, chief was the training officer.
Yeah.
And obviously, when he became the chief, that position became no longer needed, and that's when they started looking at the other firefighters and,
Okay.
Isn't that need them? So like full time?
well, chief is half, and the other firefighters all half. So the 1.5 employees essentially. Right, 1.5, 3, yeah.
So outside of the fire numbers that were just passed around, I will repeat the same thing I've said for several years here. The community grants, I don't think should be in the budget. I don't think the city council should be awarding taxpayer money to programs that the individuals who pay the taxes could donate to themselves. I just do not think the city has any reason to be awarding taxpayer dollars at the discretion of 6 individuals.
And if there's no other discussion, there is a motion at the bottom here. If anybody wants to just look at that, or
You feel better.
just.
So the community grant thing has been brought up a few times over the last few years. Is there? We could choose to not fund, put it in the budget, so there's 0, so people come forward and council will have to decide if they did or didn't approve it, where that money would then need to be pulled from. But if for long-term, if we're feeling like every year, like this is an outdated program or not something we support, would we first pull that program from the council?
Yeah, council as a
Okay.
body would then have a resolution, kind of like what we did with the downtown committee, or what we'll do with the downtown committee, just
Okay.
abolishing the program, just
Okay.
as an act of, legislative body, and then we wouldn't include it anymore.
But this committee could not fund it.
Correct.
Correct. But it's still a line item for now, even if it was 0.
Correct.
It would show as a 0 line item.
I just feel like with the up and downs of the economy over the last decade plus, I think the last thing that the elected body needs to be doing is spending constituents' money at the whim of the 6 of us who are elected. Those people all of our constituents could go donate to any cause they want. I don't think we should be deciding which cause we donate our money to.
So Brandon, if we chose to put 0 for that, what would we do with, like, to have a balanced budget? What would that 3,000, like, does it just,
I assume it's staying in the general fund.
Yeah,
In the general fund,
okay.
it will go to the unencumbered balance at the end.
okay.
Yeah.
Which then if down the road, the council decided to do something with the library, we could pull it from that?
No.
No,
Not, you can't, if you remove it and you don't allocate it to another line item within the budget, then that money is not spendable in this fiscal year.
However, I don't think that's a reason to keep the
No.
grants on the budget, because when
No.
you're talking about
No.
the library is within the city
Correct.
administrator's discretionary spending.
absolutely.
Right, so yeah, but just to clarify, so you have 2 options. You can change it to 0 and move the 3,000 to a different line item.
Mhm.
Or you can just reduce that by 3,000 total, but then that's 3,000 that is
Mhm.
unappropriated that would be carried over.
So Brandon, if it was put down to zero, where would it be best put for the potential for the library?
No, I mean, that's flexibility and
Other
terms of
things?
services, yeah.
Okay,
I think we do a great job of, keeping each other accountable for the budget, where I think we can easily find a couple $1,000 to help fund.
Yeah.
Such a
Okay.
service like that, so.
because I know it's not that much, but I wanted to make sure with,
Now, if the budget committee wants to take Councilor Gilligan's thoughts into consideration, it can be approved. And then at the end of the day, council could just say, we're not gonna fund anything, and then next year we just don't include it. It can be a bigger discussion for council.
I feel like we went through this last year too
Mhm.
by reducing it, and I said, if there's money there, council's
it's
going
gonna
to spend.
spend it.
Okay.
Right?
And then we did. No, I know, I'm just-
I did not.
We as a whole,
But the council-
I sat in the chairs actually, so I didn't spend it.
There's money appropriated to something more times than not, and this is not any shot at our council, but just generally in municipalities and local government and state government, federal government, it will get spent.
Mhm.
And, I think several people in this room, I don't know if everybody knows, but like there are municipalities that are really struggling financially right now. This is, if there's any time to be conservative, which might be all the time, but if there is a time for folks to believe that, it's in today's world. Like there are cities in real trouble right now financially, and I don't think we need to be spending extra money by way of choosing where constituents donate their causes for. If people want to donate to that, heck, I have no problem with sending a list in our water bill, like, these are the people usually put in for grants. If you want to donate personally, go ahead. The city's not going to choose for you anymore.
Mhm.
That's fine. I don't think it's our job to choose for our constituents which causes they donate money to.
Mhm.
Couple, one question on a point, I guess, was Valley Rugby invited to be here tonight?
No,
That would be in the
was in
July
council
meeting that the council would deliberate.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, this gets, if
Sure, sorry, Jim.
the resolution states that it gets sent to the application gets sent to the budget committee, so that the budget committee is aware of about how much money is being asked,
Okay,
so that they can make an informed decision of, like.
and I agree with most of what you say. But I think that there is a point where we can choose to impact the community in a good way with how much a grant may affect 100 kids or,
I agree with that.
Okay,
Totally agree with that.
Okay.
But like last year, for example, one of the scouts troops came to us and the grant, I think it was like 6 kids or something,
Yeah.
like 8 kids. Somebody might have that number, but like generally speaking, the grants we get here, we are choosing dollars from thousands of people to
Right.
benefit less than a half dozen people. And it's
So-
just, I don't think it's our role.
And I
but
don't,
that's the point where I would say, then if we decide not to spend it, I don't know if I'd be for getting rid of it. Next time when somebody comes in and says, we've got hungry people to feed, or, somebody, I want to be able to
And I-
have that flexibility, or that ability, not flexibility, but have that ability to impact our community that way.
And I think that makes sense. I think what we have is a philosophical difference. I just don't think that 6 elected folks should be choosing which causes 4,000 people put their money towards. I think all those 4,000 people who live in the city are more than welcome to donate to that cause individually if that's where they want their money to go. But I don't think it's our role to require taxes to be paid to then decide where that required money goes. We're requiring people to give to those certain causes, and I don't think that's our job. If people want to donate to that, I encourage it. I think that's fantastic.
I think
I don't
it's the
think it's our
difference between what you're stating, like a community grant, and then entering into a partnership agreement for things like the CERT services and things like that.
Yeah, if there's
So-
services that are of value to our wider community here, then we have IGAs for that. We have all kinds of vendor agreements. We can go in contractually for those things. But I don't think it's our job for charitable donations, so to speak, for grants, for us to decide what our constituents give charitably to. And I think that's what it's going to be.
It should be impactful is what I'm.
Yeah, I think if it benefits the
Gotta
whole
speak up
community,
if
that's
you
our
want
job.
that.
And I think we should do that, but
Yes.
only if it benefits the whole community. You can do that through vendor agreements, through contractor agreements, through all kinds of things that are outside of grants. I think
Right.
grants are more charitable, which I don't think that's our job. People want to be charitable. They can write checks out of their personal accounts. I love that. They shouldn't be taxed and then forced to give it to the charitable organizations as the 6 of us decide.
Perhaps, like with the parks, maybe we should send out some kind of questionnaire or survey, see if the community at large thinks it's part of our responsibility or part of our in our purview to grant money to special groups. Because I totally understand what you're saying and I understand what you're saying, but perhaps, because we don't get a lot of people who come to our meetings, maybe getting a little bit more public input on what they think we should do with this money. Because I do think the library, the bookmobile is incredibly important. As my daughters point out, we do not have a library in Lafayette, and she says it all the time. And I do agree that telling people what to do with their money or choosing what people can do with their money isn't appropriate. But maybe getting some feedback from the general public in Lafayette who is paying the taxes on whether or not they think we should be utilizing some of the tax money for special grants.
And so that's a great,
That's-
I wanna separate the library thing from this.
Okay.
Because if the council decides that's like an essential service, we can enter into some kind of paid agreement, some kind of contractual agreement. I don't think it's a grant. If it's an essential service, like for example, we pay a contractor to take care of certain public spaces. We need to do that or it's gonna look ridiculous
Yeah.
around here, right?
And
If
it's
we
cheaper to
determine-
do that than take it in-house.
Right, if we determine that's an essential service, we can contract for that. It's not necessarily a grant. I also think that our constituents already took that survey when they voted in the people they voted. in.
Mhm.
But perhaps they hadn't considered,
Can I call a
Some of
status
it.
check? Because I feel like we're talking about the overall program, which is a council discussion.
I actually think that that's the purpose of this,
Mhm,
because we're
right.
deciding whether or not to fund it.
Yeah,
it's-
right.
You know, I.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like,
But
we need to-
I think we're actually on topic. I think that this is whether or not to fund this program. So I think,
Okay.
I think this is on.
so as somebody who didn't have any social media and wasn't utterly unaware of most stuff that was going on, I would notice something in the mail saying, hey, do you as a tax-paying citizen want the city council or whatever governing body to utilize any tax funds or any city money towards certain grants for throughout the year? Most people may not even be aware that that's part of our job is to decide where things go. I certainly wouldn't have thought much about it unless something came in the mail. So I'm not arguing either point. I'm just saying that maybe like with the parks, we remind the public at large what we're doing and if they want us to do these grants or if they don't want us to do these grants, because there's almost 5,000 people here who probably have no idea what we're doing.
I just think that with parks, you're talking about a much larger project. We're talking about grants here that are less.
I know, it's just a use.
But we're talking about grants, we're talking about sending a survey out for grants that are funded at less than my property taxes of one person. I guess, I just think it's pretty, if we're gonna start doing surveys for this small of a thing, I think you're gonna do surveys for everyone.
and that's where I think that part of it is to a council discussion. I think our discussion tonight is,
Sure.
do we as a budget committee choose to fund something that the council has?
Sure, I mean, there's, I'm having trouble finding where we're pulling the money from. The only grant number I find is on page 24.
No. It is,
24, line item 30.
Page 25,
25,000.
line item 31.
community outreach.
5, line item 31.
Community outreach.
Then what is this grants number here for 125,000?
That's revenue. That's money coming
That's
into.
coming
the
Money coming in
city.
as a grant.
Right.
If I could add something,
Mhm.
because I actually was on council when we put this into place. And there was and I think we talked about this last year. And I don't remember all the details, but I remember this. We had a Boy Scout troop that was funded by the fire station, that the fire station was no longer funding. And so it was the troop for Lafayette. And the idea was to help continue Boy Scouts in Lafayette for generations to come. It spread from there to other things, but the idea was that anything that came out of that fund had to benefit a lot, the city of Lafayette, not a tiny group, not 6 people, the heart behind that was it had to benefit the city of Lafayette. And so, I mean, it seems like it's morphed into something more than that, where people can come and say, hey, I need, I know at times they were like, we need to take care of all these, whatever, details, but, anyway, I, for one, am in agreement with you. I feel like if it's a donation, people, I can donate my own you know, where I want to see it go. The library services are something different. I think that benefits the whole city. Brandon has sway over how that money is spent. It doesn't need to be budgeted in here. And I, for one, could see that going. Unless, you know, there was a discussion among the council who wanted to keep it.
You know, the only discernment that I have regarding this is if we don't have it in a community outreach and promotions category, where it would be allocated for that specific item, it'll go into a miscellaneous category or a.
It goes back to the
Are you
budget.
talking about the library specifically?
No, the 3,000.
Just where does that money go if we drop it
If
off?
the money's not in a community outreach and promotions category, for it to be accounted to that category.
Mhm.
And then if there's any money spent in that, it would be something that the people would be able to see on our accounting sheets.
Sure.
It would go into a miscellaneous category.
Well, it would go back into the general fund.
They go into, and it
That's-
just,
That's not out,
Mhm.
which
then it-
there's money there already.
but then that, whatever it would be, that would be a community element that would benefit the community, such as the library.
But that's what we're already.
We would do for this month, it would be there in that category, so if anybody asked about it, that's what it would, you could tell them exactly what it is.
It would be there, there's paper trails everywhere, it would be there, you could find where it went there, even if Brandon used his discretionary spending to do it, it would still, there.
And that's where I had asked him, if we chose to say 0 on that tonight, does he prefer us to try to find something to put that 3,000 to another program that could be house that money for the library, or is there money somewhere else? And he said there'd be money somewhere else.
Can we just move it to line item 36?
I think I'd rather put it back in the general. fund.
I think that's it.
So this is all part of the general fund, guys.
No, I mean, I'm sorry, I mean,
I know,
So you
yeah.
want it as unappropriated. So your unappropriated amount, if you switch over to page 33,
Mhm.
page 33, at the bottom, at the very, very bottom, there's a line that says unappropriated ending fund balance, and you see there's 1.4 million. That is anticipated money that the city thinks they will receive during the next fiscal year that has not been allocated to a specific expense. So if you choose not to put the $3,000 in that line item, would just be added to that. It could not be spent this fiscal year. It would just be part of the money that would be roll over as beginning fund balance for fiscal year 26-27.
now Jamie, it could be spent this year in
Right.
Brandon's discretionary spending. 'Cause it's
You
under
would have to
Put it in the, like
allocate
miscellaneous
a
or
different line
something.
item.
Does he have enough money in discretionary spending?
That's what I was just
This is
asking.
3,000.
I would find it
That's
wrong,
why I
if
said-
I would take it from materials and
Line
services.
item 36.
If you wanted to, as the accounting person, if you were anticipating that you wanted to be able to have it available for the library, I would suggest then putting it under line 14 on page 25, which is your service contracts.
How much money does Brandon have that he could play with right now for discretionary spending under our current budget as it sits in front of us?
With this budget right here,
Yes.
well, it would depend on what it was.
It would pull from different like,
Where would, if
So if-
the $3,000 went to unappropriated ending fund balance,
So the
how much
25,
would Brandon have left to play with to find that library money?
ideally, it would come out of materials and services from the administration fund.
Okay.
So per budget law, they look at the total materials and services. So budget, they don't necessarily care about the individual line items.
That's for us for accounting.
So
Sure.
Brandon has $244,750 currently per his recommended budget.
So I think the library is important. We can find the $3,000 out of the nearly $250,000 there. And I think that this 3,000 can go to unappropriated. We can carry it over, be conservative when other cities are.
because we know that this coming few years, we're gonna be having some expense.
There's tons of cuts at the state and federal level. There's less coming down to cities. I think it makes sense for us to put the extra 3,000 into carryover money. We've almost $250,000 that Brandon can use discretionary spending wise. We need to find $3,000 for a library. It's there.
Okay,
I would agree.
I still don't, I still think we should leave it there and we can be discretionary in our spending, even if it is a line item. So I know you say that if it's there, we'll spend it every year. But
Or increase
we'll
it.
wait.
That's what.
But,
The hard part is,
yeah,
the hard part is I mean, we're already in the motion where we put out applications for grants and stuff. We can't cancel the program before, I mean, we could.
Yes, we can.
We
It
can.
happens at every
No.
level of government. You know how many like DOD.
That's why I stopped
employees-
myself. I would feel bad if I said, give me your applications, and then I didn't even get to deliberate it. But there's a difference between us coming back going, oh, there's no budget this year
No,
for them.
my point is, it's in the better interest of the constituents we have. Cities are in trouble
Mhm.
financially.
Yeah.
We're preparing to not, and we're not, but to Brandon's credit, we're actually in a lot better shape than a lot of
Mhm.
places right now. And I think to continue that trend.
Yeah, no, I'm in
especially with
support of
what's ahead
zero.
us, I think that we need to continue being the way we've been with these things and looking towards the future when there's really rocky waters ahead of us right now. I think everybody who's looking at municipal finance knows that. So I just think it makes sense to be conservative on this.
Especially with the water stuff and.
Yeah, we've got all kinds of
Sewer.
infrastructure issues we're gonna have.
No, I
to
completely
address.
agree.
Yeah.
I know that we can't delete the line item, we just have to change it to zero
Oh,
and
right,
council.
sure.
are we past the deadline for grant applications?
Yes, April 1st is the,
It's not gonna get spent this year, right?
well, we don't know that, I mean,
When people apply for
What
grants,
are you
they know
buying?
it's not.
I'm not fine, I'm not saying yay or nay free rugby, I'm saying that we can't discuss that outside of a council meeting. But yes, the only thing that money would be spent on would be the rugby. I'll take back the rugby, that personalizes it, the application that has come through.
Received, okay.
So is there an action we can take tonight?
Yeah, we just changed the,
We can approve the budget with.
All right.
oh, it's the page,
Make a motion.
It doesn't change the overall amount of the budget.
it's just,
It
Yeah.
just reduces.
okay, so what was it, page 20?
So, wait a second. Don't make a motion.
No, I'm not making a motion, I'm just,
So when it comes to the rugby, we're gonna tell them there's no money there.
The funding's been cut.
I mean, technically, council could still hear it out, and I think technically that resolution standing that we're supposed to, and it would be up to council to decide if we're gonna go over budget.
Well, the thing is they applied for a grant. How many times have you applied for a grant and it's been denied?
I know,
It's just,
Yeah, that's the grant world.
Yeah, that's the grant world, I'm just saying whether or not it still goes before council,
Yeah.
I think we'd have to look.
Status check.
They still go before council.
Yeah,
All right.
okay,
I move to approve the city of Lafayette budget for the fiscal year of 2025 to 2026 with a revision to reduce line item
page 25, 30.
31 on page 25 to 0 and to move those funds back into the unallocated portion of the general fund.
I'll second.
Yeah, you go. So we have more discussion now?
Oh, well, I mean, I know that they want, it wasn't good.
No, we have
It was just one
we
copy.
have a motion and a second.
Okay.
So let me just clarify, I move that the budget committee of the city of Lafayette approve the fiscal year 2025 to 2026 budget in the amount of 192,867,669. Approve property taxes for the 2025-2026 fiscal year at the rate of 3,408.57 per 1,000 of assessed value for the permanent rate tax levy and in the amount of $236,750 for the general obligation bond levy with the revision that the 3,000 be reduced to 0 on page 25, line item 31.
Yeah, that was impressive.
Sorry, my head really hurts.
That's like a filibuster.
Counselor Kit, did you wanna?
I'll second. Mayor Malcolmson,
Aye.
Counselor Carswell.
Aye.
Counselor Livingston.
Aye.
Counselor Paulson.
Aye.
Counselor Burrows.
Aye.
Counselor Cahill. Aye. Counselor Mackey.
Aye.
Christine Brungart.
Aye.
Chair Adamson.
Aye.
Michael Shinley.
Aye.
Leah Harper. Aye. Shirley Burkett. Susan Harple. Kelly Wisdom.
All items on the meeting minutes have been dealt with. We have a motion to adjourn.
I have a question.
Okay.
On the application that we see for a grant. Are we gonna vote on that in July then?
Yeah.
Is that one that's coming up in July?
It's a council.
Yeah, it's a
question.
It'll be a council question in July, okay.
Yeah.
That was.
Hi, June, right?
July.
Yeah. I'll talk to you about that at the next meeting. I'll talk to council about my feelings on it.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned. I don't get to use it.